Welcome back on part 2 of styling the Notes application. In this one, we're going to kick things off by finishing up the edit page. There's actually not a whole lot left to do with the edit page. By adding just a few classes and a few new HTML elements, we'll be able to convert the page from what it currently looks like to the final version, which looks a whole lot nicer. To kick things off, let's go ahead and make some modifications to edit.html. What we're going to do is take these 3 elements right here, our input, our text area, and our button, and we are going to put them inside of a wrapper div. So right here, the div is going to have a class of container. So .container with the tab key is going to get that done. Then we can copy and paste these 3 elements in. I'm actually going to cut them and paste them, removing them from their previous location. Once we indent things and actually save the file, let me go ahead and remove some of these empty lines. We should see the centered elements. Over here, they are indeed centered, following that same centered rectangle as the rest of the content. Now from here, there are classes for the individual fields as well. One for the input, one for the text area, and also one for the button. We're going to go ahead and set those up, and then we'll be done with this file. Right here, a class for our input. The class for this one is called title input. Down below, we are also going to add a class for our text area. So class equals. The class for this one is body-input. Then all the way down below for our button, we're going to be adding a class as well. Right here, a class equal to button. If we go ahead and save the program, what do we get? Over in the browser, we get styled versions of all of our inputs. We have our title up above with nice big text. Down below, we have our note body in slightly smaller text. And then down below that, we have our remove note button. Now for the remove note button, we also have a secondary version of it. So in terms of the BEM naming convention, it would be M, a modifier. We can add this onto the button as well. We're going to add a second class that is button -- secondary. So the primary button is going to be this nice blue color, the theme color. The secondary button is going to be a gray, and that's what I'm going to use for the remove note button, which doesn't really need attention called to it. And there we go. We have all of these styles in place for the edit page, and we can turn our focus towards the home page. Now on the home page, we're going to get a bit more done. There are a few things we have to actually do to get all of this working, and it is going to require some JavaScript code changes as well. The first change I'd like to make has to do with what happens when we have no notes. There's no message that shows up saying much of anything, like you have no notes, add one to get started. So what we want to do is render a paragraph when there are no notes after matching our filters, of course. So let's go ahead and make a change to the appropriate file over inside of Visual Studio Code. We want to crack open the notes functions file. And if we scroll down a little bit, we are looking for, near the bottom, the render notes function. The render notes function is what renders our notes using for each to loop over each note. But if there are none, nothing actually gets rendered. All we're going to do is add an if statement into the mix to check how many notes we're actually rendering. If we're rendering more than 0, great, we'll run that code. Otherwise, we're just going to print a static message to the screen saying you have no notes. Right here, if we're going to check filtered notes.length. Is that number greater than 0? If it is, we're going to run this code, else we will run some other code. Now the code we're going to run for the past condition is just going to be this code right here. We're going to take it exactly as it currently is and paste it inside of there. So if there are notes, go ahead and loop over each one. If there are no notes inside of that else clause, we're going to create a paragraph, give it a text content, and then we're just going to render it into the document. Let's go ahead and actually set that up. Right here, I'm going to start by creating that paragraph, const empty message equals document dot create element to make that new element. I'm going to make this one a paragraph. Then down below, we're going to go ahead and set up its text content, empty message dot text content. And we can pick whatever message we like for this. I'm going to go with no notes to show. Perfect. Down below this, we're actually going to go ahead and render things to the document. Now, the place we're trying to put these notes has already been selected twice in this function with document.querySelector. So we can break that out into a variable and use the variable so we don't have to write out the whole selector again. I'm going to take everything from document to the closing parentheses in querySelector, copy it to the clipboard, then up top in render notes, I can create a variable like notes L for notes element. I can paste the selector in, then I can reference that in all two existing places as well as the new one. Right here, notes element.innerHTML. Down below, what do we have? We have another instance of it for the append child call. So notes element.append child. And then finally, we're going to add something new right here. Notes element.append child again, adding our empty message to the screen. Perfect. If we go ahead and save things in their current state, when we have no saved notes, we can see that our little message shows up. We have no notes to show printing to the screen. Now, there is a class set up to style this paragraph as well, but the interesting thing is that the paragraph is created using JavaScript. It's not created using HTML markup in our HTML files. I know how to add a class over here. I don't know how to add a class to an element we create with JavaScript. Well, there is a method available to us that gets this done. Right here, we're going to be using empty message.classList. On ClassList, we have access to a few different methods. We can use add to add one. We can use remove to remove a class. We have toggle to toggle a class on and off. We have contains to check if a class is indeed already on an element. In our case, we're going to use add to add a new class. Right here, the class that I've set up is called empty-message. Now, if we go ahead and save the program with this one new line in place, we can see that our empty message now has a bit more space around it, and it is centered in the screen. So there we go. That's one of the things I wanted to accomplish with our JavaScript changes, rendering an empty list message. The next thing that I want to change inside of our JavaScript files has to do with the individual note items being rendered on this screen. So let's actually get a couple rendering. I'm going to add a few notes. I'll add one for course, topic, ideas. Then down below, I'll add another one for GraphQL notes, for example. And if I go ahead and go home, what do I get? I get my two notes. I have a remove button for each, and I have the text. They're really close and cramped, and there's no other meta information. What I'm going to do is change what's actually shown here. We're going to keep the notes title. That's the most important piece of information, but we're going to get rid of that remove button. It doesn't really make sense to be removing notes from the screen, though you could keep it around if you really felt strongly about it. I'm also going to include when a note was last edited, and I'm going to include that just below the actual text for the note title. Now, getting all of this done isn't going to take a ton of work, but it is going to require us to make a few structural changes to just one of our functions. Up above, that is the generate note DOM function. This is where we create the three elements, we set them up, and then we render them. We are still going to be working with some elements, although slightly differently. Let's start with this first element, the note element. This is still going to exist, but it's no longer going to be a div. I'm actually going to switch it over to be an anchor tag. We want the whole note element to be clickable, not necessarily just the title. So if I'm also including other information like the last edited at, I want that whole container to be clickable. Now, the text element itself is still going to exist, although I'm going to switch that over to a paragraph. There's no need to have multiple links here. We just have one link as the root element. And then down below, we're actually going to remove the button completely. So I can take all of the button setup code as well as the button variable and just delete it from the function. From here, we are going to add a third element in. Instead of being the button, though, it is going to be the status, which in our case is going to contain when the note was last edited. So const status equals document.create element. We're going to go ahead and create a second paragraph for that information. Now let's start making tweaks down below. This code right here sets up the text element. The only thing that's going to change for that is that we're no longer going to set up an href because it's no longer an anchor tag. It is just a paragraph. So I'm going to take this line and cut it out, adding it to the clipboard. We're going to bring it back in, just modifying it slightly in a few moments when we actually set up the note element. So right here, what do we have? We have our text being set up. The next thing we're going to do down below is set up the link. Right here, the only thing we're going to do is paste the line we had before, but we're going to change where we're setting the attribute. Instead of the text element, it is going to be the note element. That's a lowercase n, of course. And there we go. That's all we need to do for the note element. Last up is our status message. So right here, set up the status message. And we're going to go ahead and add its text content. So status.textContent. And this is just going to be the last edited at message. And remember, we created a function for that. It was called generate last edited. And it took the timestamp. So in this case, we would pass in note dot updated at. And the only other thing we have to do for the status is to actually render it by adding it in. That would be note element dot append child. And we will append the status in. I'm actually going to stick with status element to stay consistent. So I'll change that here, and up above, I'll change that here as well. If we save the file, what do we get? Over in the browser, we are indeed getting the extra information. We now have last edited 14 minutes ago showing up for both notes, which is indeed correct. From here, all we need to do to apply the rest of the styles is actually add some classes. And the classes are going to be added, as you might have suspected, from right here in JavaScript. We're going to add a class to each one of those elements. Let's go ahead and start off with the note element itself. So that gets set up right here. We're going to use note element dot class list dot add. We are going to pass in the class we'd like to add, and I have one for this. It's called list-item. We're also going to be setting up classes for our other two elements. Right here, we can set up text elements class list. That's text element dot class list dot add. In this case, we are going to be adding list-item __ title. And there is just one more class to add, and that is for the status. So down below, we're going to use status element dot class list using its add method. And the class we're going to add here is list-item __ subtitle. So we have our root element list-item. Inside of there, we have a title and a subtitle. If we go ahead and save the notes functions file in its current state, what do we get over in the browser? We get something that looks closer to what we were hoping for. It's clear that a lot of styles are being applied now. We're almost done, but not quite there. All of the rest of the changes are super easy. We just need to make a few changes to index.html itself. Right here, we have the notes list and the button. We just need to do a bit of restructuring. Right here, below the closing div for actions, we're going to create a new div with the class of container to correctly center everything inside of it, which in this case is going to be the list and the button. So let's take both of those, cut them out, and paste them up above, indenting them correctly. Then we can remove the empty line. And the only other thing we have to do to this HTML is to add a class to button. So right here, we do not want that default button style. We're going to set up the class button. Now notice I'm using button and not button secondary like we did in the edit page. So over here, I would expect a blue button, and that is exactly what I get. And there we go. We have a styled version of the notes application. I can open up GraphQL notes to edit those notes. I could remove it if I wanted to. Then I come back to my list. I could go ahead and search or sort. If I search for something that matches no notes, I get my little no notes to show message showing up. So that's where we're going to stop for the notes application. We have our styles in place, and you can always expand on these should you like to, adding new features or new functionality. I'm going to give you some ideas at the very end of the course of other features that you can add for all of the applications. Oh, I almost forgot. I also wanted to set up the title and the icon for both of those pages. So over inside of index.html, we can get that done right here. I will set up the title. I can pick whatever title I like. Notes app seems to get the job done. Then I can set up the link for the icon. So right here, let's create the link. And now before we actually fill out its information, let's go ahead and grab it. As always, you can grab the images directory from the lecture zip for this lecture. So if I head over to the Finder, here is the lecture zip. If I go into that, we have the Notes app folder. Right in there, we have the images folder with our blue circle to match the color for this theme. I'm going to copy that images folder to the clipboard. Over inside of our JS Bootcamp Notes app directory, I'm going to paste that folder, and we should see that showing up over here. Right here, it is showing up in Visual Studio Code. Now we can set up the link attributes. We want href pointing to that file, /images /fave icon.png, and the other attribute we're going to set up is the relationship right here, icon. We can take both of these lines exactly as we have them, copy them to the clipboard, and use them inside of edit.html as well. Right over here, I'm going to paste those lines in, save things, and what are we getting? We are getting our title and our icon showing up for the home page. If I go over to the edit page, it's showing up there as well. That's where we're going to stop for this one. We're going to move on to starting the process of styling our last app in the next video. I'm excited to get to that, so I'll see you then.